Welcome back to the deep dive. I had a bit of a surreal moment yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was walking down the street, just absolutely starving, looking for a place to grab lunch. And in the span of about, I don't know, maybe 50 yards?
A pretty standard city block.
Right, just a short walk. But I passed this taco stand that smelled amazing. A high-end French bakery with those perfect little macarons in the window and a place selling Taiwanese bubble tea.
Sounds like you had a pretty good lunch dilemma on your hands.
I really did. But it hit me right then that the world just feels incredibly small right now. I mean, we always talk about globalization as this massive economic concept, but physically, right there on the sidewalk, it feels like cultures aren't just existing in their own little bubbles anymore.
No, they definitely aren't. They are constantly bumping into each other.
Yeah, bumping into each other perfectly describes it.
And that bumping is exactly what we are digging into today. We've got a fascinating stack of notes here on the geography of cultural diffusion and interaction patterns.
Which, I will be honest, sounds like the title of a textbook that costs $300 and is used as a doorstop.
It does sound a bit dry, doesn't it?
A little bit, yeah.
But stick with us because this is basically the user manual for understanding your own neighborhood. We are going to look at what actually happens when those cultures collide. Do they blend? Do they fight? Does one just vanish completely?
Right. And to answer that, we first have to talk about a term that kept popping up in the research, which is the cultural landscape. I actually love this term. It sounds very artistic.
It is, in a way. The cultural landscape is essentially the visible imprint of human activity on the physical world.
Okay.
It is everything you see outside your window. The architecture, the street signs, the places of worship, the food people are eating on the sidewalk.
So it's basically the evidence that a culture was there.
Exactly. I mean, nature gives us the physical landscape, right? The mountains, rivers, trees. But humans create the cultural landscape. When cultures interact, they leave physical evidence behind.
So if I see a pagoda-style roof on a building in San Francisco or, say, a German beer hall made of that heavy, majestic brick in Milwaukee, that is the cultural landscape talking to me.
Precisely. You are reading the history of the people who lived there, and our mission today is to decode the big four patterns of what happens when these landscapes interact.
The big four.
Yes. The source material breaks them down into acculturation, assimilation, syncretism, and multiculturalism.
The big four. I like it. Let's unpack these because I think people, myself included, tend to mix them up a lot. I want to start with the first one, which seems to me like the most common scenario, and that's acculturation.
Let's dive in. Acculturation is a really interesting starting point because it is entirely about balance.
To me, this sounds like the best of both worlds scenario, or maybe just the most pragmatic one.
Yeah.
How do we define it properly based on the notes?
So acculturation is defined as the process where a minority or weaker culture adopts certain traits of the dominant culture, usually just to function effectively in that society. But, and this is the crucial part, they successfully maintain their own original cultural identity.
So it's about adaptation, not replacement.
Exactly. Think of it as operating with a dual identity.
I see. So practically speaking, this is the immigrant experience we see all the time. You move to a new country, and you have to learn the dominant language.
Right.
You have to figure out the currency, the transit system, maybe even change the way you dress for a job interview just to fit the corporate code.
You adopt those traits to function economically. You learn the language to get employment. But when you close your front door at the end of the day, you switch back.
You switch back to your roots.
Yes. You speak your native tongue, you cook traditional meals, you practice your original religious traditions. The public face adapts, but the private identity remains completely intact.
It's a public versus private dynamic. It reminds me of code switching. You put on the suit for the corporate world, but you wear the traditional clothes at home.
Precisely. But here is where it gets really nuanced. The source material emphasizes that this isn't just a one-way street.
Yeah, this was a massive aha moment for me. I used to think acculturation was just the minority changing to fit the majority. You moved here, so you adapt to us. But the notes say it is bidirectional.
It is absolutely bidirectional. The dominant culture changes, too.
Think about my lunch example from the intro. Tacos and bubble tea.
That is exactly it. That is the dominant culture acculturating to the minority presence. The source specifically points out the ubiquity of Chinese, Mexican, and Indian restaurants in major U.S. and European cities.
Right.
That isn't just food. That is the majority population adopting the preferences of the cultures living within their borders.
That is such a cool way to look at it. If I am eating curry on a Tuesday and tacos on a Friday, I've
Yeah.
changed. My diet has been acculturated.
And that changes the cultural landscape. You see it in the architecture, maybe a Chinatown gate in a Western city, or the celebration of holidays. Think about Chinese New Year.
Oh, yeah, it's huge.
Right. In many cities, that isn't just a private event anymore. It is a parade that shuts down major streets. Everyone watches it.
Or St. Patrick's Day in New York or Chicago. It is an Irish tradition, but the whole city turns green.
Exactly. That is the visual impact of acculturation. The minority culture is visible, distinct, and functioning within the wider society. It has influenced the mainstream.
So acculturation is essentially, I adapt to you, but I stay me. And eventually you might adapt a little bit to me too.
That is the optimistic version, yes.
Yeah.
But now we have to move to the second pattern, and this one is very distinct. It is much more absolute. This is assimilation.
Assimilation. I feel like this word gets thrown around a lot, sometimes interchangeably with acculturation, but in geography and sociology, they're very different things, aren't they?
Very different. If acculturation is addition, adding a language, adding a skill, assimilation is subtraction. It is about the erasure of difference.
So no more dual identity.
No. Assimilation occurs when a minority group assumes all, or nearly all, the traits of the dominant culture. The result is the complete loss of the original culture. The group is entirely absorbed into the majority. Yes, instead of a landscape filled with diverse distinctions, you get uniformity.
Uniformity rather than diversity. That is a really powerful distinction. Now, the source breaks this down into two types, voluntary and forced. Let's start with the voluntary one, because the example here actually really surprised me.
It surprises a lot of people. The source discusses German immigrants in the United States.
Which is wild, because historically, Germans are the largest ethnic group in the U.S.
They are, and yet, if you walk around most American cities today, you do not see a massive, distinct German town in the same way you might see a Little Italy or a Chinatown.
Why is that? Why did they vanish into the background?
Well, the source points to the World Wars. During World War I and World War II, being German in America was complicated. To say the least, there was a lot of suspicion.
Right, I can imagine. If your country of origin is at war with your new home, you probably do not want to stand out.
Exactly. So many German immigrants voluntarily minimized their differences. They stopped speaking German in public. They anglicized their names. Schmidt became Smith, Müller became Miller. They blended in to avoid being viewed as the enemy.
So they chose to assimilate for survival and social acceptance. They melted into the pot so completely that the distinct Germanness just faded from the visual landscape.
That is voluntary assimilation. But we also have to talk about the darker side of this diffusion, forced assimilation.
Yeah, this is where the history gets really heavy. We aren't talking about choices here. We are talking about coercion.
The source highlights the experience of Native Americans in the 19th century. This wasn't just about diffusion, it was about deliberate policy.
Right. We have the Indian Removal Act, which forced relocation to reservations. But then there's the aspect of cultural erasure that happened through the education system.
Yes, the boarding schools. The policy shifted to forced education where children were taken from their families, they were given American names, forced to cut their hair, and explicitly forbidden from speaking their native languages or practicing their traditions.
It was a systematic attempt to wipe out the original culture entirely. The phrase in the notes was, kill the Indian to save the man.
Exactly. And if we look at this through the lens of geography and the landscape, the result is that the visible diversity, the unique imprint of those indigenous cultures was aggressively reduced. Unlike acculturation, where you see the celebration of difference, assimilation leaves a landscape that looks uniform. The diversity is erased.
It is a sobering reminder that cultural change isn't always a happy accident. Sometimes it's deliberate erasure.
Absolutely. It is important to remember that the map we see today is often the result of power dynamics, not just natural mingling.
Okay, let's take a breath and pivot a bit here. We have talked about maintaining identity with acculturation and losing identity with assimilation. But what happens when you mash two things together and get something completely wild and new?
Ah, yes, now we're talking about syncretism.
Syncretism. I love this concept. It's like the remix of cultural geography.
The remix is a perfect way to put it. The definition here is the blending of two or more cultural traits to create an entirely new trait, practice, or belief system.
So it's not 1 + 1 = 2, it is 1 + 1 = 3. You get a third, totally new thing.
Precisely. And the source gives us some incredible examples of this, spanning language, religion, and tradition.
Let's start with language. The source mentions Swahili. Now, I know Swahili is spoken by millions in East Africa, but I didn't realize it was a syncretic language.
It is. Swahili developed in sub-Saharan Africa, specifically along the coast. It is a mix of indigenous African languages, Bantu languages mostly, and Arabic.
Arabic. How did Arabic get mixed in there?
Trade. The Indian Ocean Trade Network. For centuries, you had these monsoon winds that allowed ships to sail back and forth between Africa, Arabia, and India. Arabic-speaking merchants were sailing down the coast of East Africa to do business.
Oh, wow. So to trade ivory or gold or spices, people needed a way to communicate.
Exactly. So over time, the local grammar and vocabulary blended with Arabic words to create Swahili. It wasn't forced, it was a practical evolution born entirely from the marketplace.
That is fascinating. So the language itself is basically a map of the trade routes.
It is. It is a living artifact of economic interaction.
Okay, what about religion? The source brings up Sikhism.
Yes, Sikhism emerged in the 16th century in the Punjabi region of South Asia. Geographically, this area is a massive crossroads. You had Hinduism and Islam interacting in the exact same space.
And Sikhism is the result of that interaction.
In a way, yes. Sikhism emerged as a blend of certain beliefs and practices from both faiths, while also rejecting some tenets of both, to form a completely new, distinct faith. It is a prime example of religious syncretism.
So it wasn't just being both, it was taking elements of both to build a new foundation.
Exactly. That is the essence of syncretism. It is creative. It solves the problem of how do we live together by making something totally new.
And we see this in the Americas too, right? I mean, the traditions here are a massive melting pot of influences.
Oh, absolutely. The source highlights the Mexican Day of the Dead.
Dia de los Muertos.
Right. If you look at the imagery, the skulls, the altars, the specific relationship with ancestors, it has deep roots in indigenous traditions that go back thousands of years. But it is celebrated in alignment with the Catholic calendar, specifically All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day.
It is a mashup of indigenous ancestor worship and Catholic beliefs.
Exactly. And the source also mentions Vodou in Haiti and Santeria in Cuba.
Is that the same mechanism?
Same mechanism. You have the forced migration of African people via the slave trade, bringing their spiritual traditions. Then that collides with the European Catholicism imposed by the colonizers.
Right, because the enslaved people were often forced to convert.
Yes. So they syncretized. They associated their traditional spirits, the Orishas or Lavas, with Catholic saints. The result isn't African religion, and it isn't European Catholicism. It is Vodou. It is Santeria. It is a new syncretic system.
It is incredible to think about. Out of collision and often out of tragedy, human creativity finds a way to build something completely new.
And that creates a unique cultural landscape. When you see a Day of the Dead altar, you are looking at history. You are looking at the physical evidence of that syncretism.
Okay, so we have covered acculturation, the dual identity, assimilation, the erasure, and syncretism, the remix. That brings us to the final pattern, which is multiculturalism.
Multiculturalism. This is the pattern that most modern globalized societies aspire to.
The source defines this as a society where multiple cultures coexist without the pressure to assimilate.
That is the key phrase, without pressure. In a multicultural society, diversity is viewed as a value. It is seen as something that enriches the collective rather than a problem that needs to be solved or erased.
This is where we get the metaphor of the melting pot, although I have heard people call it a salad bowl too.
The salad bowl is actually a much better visual for multiculturalism. In a melting pot, everything melts together into one goo that is closer to assimilation. In a salad bowl, the tomato is still a tomato, the lettuce is still lettuce, but they are all in the same bowl with the same dressing.
I really like that. The source uses melting pot, but clarifies it by saying that while people share core values like a belief in democracy in the U.S., for example, they hold on to their unique traits. They do not have to give them up to be part of the whole.
Exactly.
And if we want to see this in action, where do we look?
The urban landscape. The source points to global cities like Toronto, London, Paris, and New York.
The big metropolises.
Exactly. Walking through these cities is a masterclass in multiculturalism. You have distinct ethnic neighborhoods sitting right next to each other. You have diverse signage in multiple languages. You see a mosque, a synagogue, and a church all within a few blocks of each other.
And the food. We keep coming back to food today, but it really is the most obvious indicator.
It is. In a multicultural landscape, you have an array of international food options everywhere. It is not just one dominant cuisine with a few exceptions. It is a buffet of the world.
So in a multicultural society, I can be fully American or British or Canadian while also being fully Italian or Korean or Nigerian. I do not have to choose.
That is the ideal, and the landscape reflects that coexistence.
Okay, we have covered a lot of ground today. Before we wrap up, I want to do a quick lightning round recap. I am going to throw the term at you, and I
Mhm.
want the bumper sticker definition based on what we have discussed. Are you ready?
I am ready. Let's do it.
Acculturation.
Keep the old, adopt the new. You function in the dominant culture, but you keep your identity.
Assimilation.
Lose the old, become the new. The original culture is erased and absorbed.
Secretism.
Create something brand new. 1 + 1 = 3.
Multiculturalism.
Keep the old, live side by side. Diversity is the norm.
Perfect. That helps lock it in.
It is important to remember, though, that these aren't just static categories. The source mentions that globalization is speeding all of this up exponentially.
Right. The bumping of cultures that we talked about at the start is happening faster than ever before.
Exactly. We are trading, migrating, and communicating instantly. That means these processes, acculturation, syncretism, are happening at warp speed compared to history. It took centuries for Swahili to develop. Today, slang terms cross the ocean in seconds on social media.
And that brings us back to why this matters to you, the listener. We started by saying the world feels small, but really, this is about being able to read the world around you.
It is. Every time you walk through your neighborhood, you are looking at data. You're looking at the physical evidence of these four concepts. The architecture, the restaurant signs, the festivals, they're telling you the story of who lives there and how they are interacting with each other.
It is like having a decoder ring for your daily commute.
And here's a thought I would love you, the listener, to take with you. The source calls the cultural landscape the visible imprint of human activity. So, next time you're out, look at your own local community. Really look at it.
What should they be looking for?
Ask yourself which of the four patterns is most visible right now. Is your town a clear example of multiculturalism? Or do you see syncretism happening?
And more importantly, is it shifting?
That is the big question. Is it moving from one to another? Are you seeing a neighborhood that used to be distinctively multicultural starting to assimilate? Or are you seeing new syncretic traditions popping up out of nowhere? The landscape is never finished. It is always changing.
That is a great place to leave it. The world is changing, and now you know how to watch it happen. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.
It was a pleasure. Keep observing out there.
Catch you next time.